PT is a game that has inspired many games to create claustrophobic horror games in the confines of a house. Till today, it's considered one of the most groundbreaking horror games, even though it's only a demo. An unnamed protagonist wakes up in a concrete-walled room with a door leading him to a never-ending loop. He becomes haunted by a female entity, revealing the gruesome backstory of a series of familicides before the truth behind his torment is unveiled. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator. This video will contain spoilers about the game. With that in mind, let's begin.
Watch out. The gap in the door. It's a separate reality. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?
The story begins with the surreal and cryptic line, indicating what the protagonist is about to experience is not the actual reality, and possibly is a duplicate of himself, maybe a clone or an astral version of himself. The unnamed protagonist then wakes up in a cubicle, concrete-walled room with the first sight of two cockroaches mating. This could be a metaphor of duality or more sinister elements. As foretold, the only door of the room slightly opens, leaving a gap, which the protagonist is left with no other option than to go through it, subsequently putting him in a separate reality. Going through the door, the protagonist finds himself inside a house with a radio announcement playing in the background of a horrendous familicide.
This brutal killing took place while the family was gathered at home on a Sunday afternoon. The day of the crime, the father went to the trunk of his car, retrieved the rifle, and shot his wife as she was cleaning up the kitchen after lunch. When his 10-year-old son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot him too. His 6-year-old daughter had the good sense to hide in the bathroom, but reports suggest he lured her out by telling her it was just a game. The girl was found shot once in the chest from point-blank range. The mother, who he shot in the stomach, was pregnant at the time. Police arriving on scene after neighbors called 911 found the father in his car listening to the radio. Several days before the murders, neighbors say they heard the father repeating a sequence of numbers in a loud voice. They said it was like he was chanting some strange spell. There was another family shot to death in the same state last month, and in December last year, a man used a rifle and meat cleaver to murder his entire family. In each case, the perpetrators were fathers. State police say this string of domestic homicides appears unrelated, though it could be part of a larger trend such as employment, child care, and other social issues facing the average family.
A man killed his wife and 2 children, being seen to have kept on repeating a spell a few days prior. Another similar murder case was involved in the same estate of a father killing his family. Despite the police labeling the murder cases as unrelated, the radio announcer speculates that this might be due to issues of employment, childcare, and other social aspects. This directly correlates with the Amityville horror series, where the fathers become possessed by unseen forces latched to the house and murder their families. But more on this later. A photograph of the couple showed them on the day of their wedding, both smiling and happy, being reminiscent of the 1970s style. The time on the clock reads 11:59, and another drawer top shows the amount of medicine someone, presumably the father, must have been taken, maybe suggestive of him suffering mental delusions and trying to treat it with psychosis medicine. The protagonist goes to the end of the hall and goes through another door, seemingly leading to the basement, but he teleports back to the first door, which he opened from the concrete room. The house is still the same, with the time still showing 11:59, possibly being the time the father committed the murders. There are booze bottles and cans scattered around, which might imply that the father suffered from alcoholism. Therefore, the speculation of the radio announcer might be true, that the fathers had a mental breakdown due to social issues and unemployment. The end door is locked this time, with paranormal events occurring. Something banging the door of the bathroom from inside. The end door then suddenly opens, and the protagonist goes through another loop. In this loop, when the protagonist reaches the door at the end of the corridor, it suddenly closes, with the bathroom door opening on its own, being left ajar. The cries of a baby can be heard from the inside. As the protagonist tries to peek through, a demonic entity then suddenly appears, shutting the door from inside the bathroom. The door at the end of the hall then suddenly opens, welcoming the protagonist to another loop. In the new loop, this female entity stands tall beneath the entry hall's chandelier, having a bloody gown, a badly trimmed hair, and only one high heel. As the protagonist valiantly approaches her, the lights shut off, and this presence disappears. Crying and moaning sounds in agony are audible, portraying physical assault. When the lights turn on, the hall becomes infested with more cockroaches, starting to indicate what this female presence might have went through. Cockroaches being indication of dirt, maybe the representation of this female's burial site. In the next loop, the bathroom door opens on its own, with a flickering flashlight on the floor, inviting the protagonist to take it. The tiled floors are smeared with blood, and it's generally in a pretty bad state, when suddenly the door closes, trapping the protagonist in. The sink of the bathroom has an underdeveloped fetus crying loudly, creating an uneasy surreal scene, with the sound of the female entity approaching the bathroom door from the end of the hallway, with one foot being bare and another having a high heel, having a specific walking sound. She tries to open the door a few times, but soon leaves when the door opens slightly on its own, letting the protagonist leave this putrid, godforsaken bathroom. The new loop becomes more hostile and surreal, with the female entity being heard behind the protagonist, making gasping sounds, with her specific walking sound being heard. The radio then has interference with another voice, directly speaking to the protagonist.
Don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started.
Retrieved the rifle and shot his wife as she was cleaning up the kitchen.
You can't trust the tap water.
While the son came to investigate the commotion, the father shot him too. His 6-year-old daughter had the good sense to hide in the bathroom, but reports suggest he lured her out by telling her it was just a game. The girl was found shot once in the chest from point-blank range. The mother, who was shot in the stomach, was
204-863.
seen after neighbors called 911 found the father in his car listening to the radio. Several days before the murders,
Look behind you. I said, look behind you.
Mentioning not to trust the tap water. This hints out towards the Project MK Ultra, a real-life, experimental, unethical practice carried out by the CIA in the USA, contaminating the tap water with hallucinogenic drugs to mind control its citizens. This was kept as top secret at the time and only recently unveiled, with many people at the time committing crimes, self-harms, and much worse due to the influence of being drugged. It's a possibility that the fathers who committed the murders were in some way affected by the tap water, causing them to hear things on the radio and hallucinate, leading to alcohol and medicine dependency, and eventually killing their families. The female entity, whom many know as Lisa, keeps following the protagonist, but whenever he turns around, he doesn't see her, as if she quickly turns with him. Thanks to a mother, it was revealed that Lisa was in fact behind the protagonist during the segment. The loop repeats itself walking through the end door, with the radio having the same interference, reading out some cryptic numbers, in a way portraying the inner voices the fathers might have been hearing before committing the familicides. This time, when the radio instructs the protagonist to look behind, the female entity appears, repeatedly bashing the protagonist's head, submitting him to the ground. The female entity, or also known as Lisa, has her right eye gouged out, with her left eye bulging. There's puke all over her face, showing the gruesome way she might have died. After the protagonist passes out and wakes up, he finds himself back in the concrete-walled room. There lies a paper bag with blood dried around and over it, with something circular inside. The paper bag then starts talking, uttering nonsensical sentences.
I walked. I could do nothing but walk. And then I saw me walking in front of myself. But it wasn't really me. Watch out. The gap in the door. It's a separate reality. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?
The paper bag informs the protagonist about the surreality of this interaction and his experiences, something that will make much more sense at the ending. There are several tally markings on the walls, suggesting that the protagonist must have been stuck here for a long time, looping over and over again. And if not him, maybe many more people before him. The protagonist, clearly being determined to get out, goes through the door once more, being back in the looping corridors. The wedding photograph of the couple now has a writing on it saying, "Gouge it out," with the wife being crossed out and the man raising his hand, giving a thumbs up. Looking at the picture puts a hole on the right eye of the wife, indicating how this woman must be the same vengeful female entity, chasing after the protagonist. The walking sound behind the protagonist stops, as if this entity wanted to show the protagonist how horribly she was killed. The door at the end then suddenly opens, with a new writing on top of the door. "Forgive me, Lisa. There's a monster inside of me." This is presumably a representation of the husband's inner thoughts, who murdered his wife, Lisa, in a twisted manner, who is presumably the female entity toying with the protagonist. This explains the husband wasn't inherently bad, but something paranormal got a hold of him, guiding his body to commit the atrocious crimes against his family. This is reminiscent of the people who fell victims to the inhumane covert experiment conducted on unknowing American civilians. Many of the victims who killed others were hallucinating and hearing voices, a side effect of the hallucinogenic drugs they were unknowingly consuming from the tap water. They thought of them to be paranormal monsters taking a hold of them, while in fact, they were nothing but mere psychotic side effects of the drugs. A fridge then appears suspended with ropes, with muffled baby cries being heard from inside, and water seeping out, with the radio announcing that after the killings, The father then hung himself with their garden hose. In the new loop, the baby cries transforms into unbearable screechings. A writing on the wall reads, "I can hear them calling to me from," which soon reveals to end with hell, yet again showing who the voices the husband was hearing, he thought, come from. A laughing voice then is heard from Lisa, and the protagonist goes into a new loop. In there, the time has finally moved forward to 12 a.m., the midnight. Entering the end door again creates a never-ending loop, with the family photos now being covered by strange, creepy moving body parts images. The protagonist's vision becomes blurry, and now he's able to run in red-lit, looping corridors. Through a peephole, the protagonist listens to gruesome sounds of the murder, presumably being the first family murder, with the husband using a cleaver knife.
Now it's time for action. Our society is rotten to the core. I'm talking to all the fine, upstanding folks got their welfare cut, got their jobs pulled out from under us. You know what to do. Now's the time. Do it.
Going into the bathroom, a monologue plays, unveiling more backstory.
You got fired, so you drowned your sorrows in booze. She had to get a part-time job working a grocery store cash register. Only reason she could earn a wage at all is the manager liked how she looked in a skirt. You remember, right? Exactly 10 months back.
The unempathetic voice informs the protagonist that he drowned his sorrows in booze after being laid off, with the wife working as a grocery store cashier to support the family, only being able to have this job as the store owner was attracted to the wife, showing how low the husband stooped, shattering his dignity and his wife's honor for money, knowing exactly that the owner gave his wife the job just because he was attracted to her, as the voice puts an emphasis that the husband knew about it. The protagonist then enters a new loop, with the color of lights turning back to normal. The radio keeps on repeating the same numbers over and over again. 2048 63, with the protagonist approaching the telephone, when suddenly a yellow screen appears with a writing saying, "I'll call you later," which teleports him back to the concrete room. After leaving the room, time goes back to 11:59, waiting 1 minute for the time, then it goes back to 12 in the midnight again, with the agonizing cries and moans of Lisa being heard again. After a while of waiting, a telephone message informs the protagonist that he's been chosen. Going through the door again unveils the more cryptic messages from the guy behind the radio.
Dad was such a drag. Every day he'd eat the same kind of food, dress the same, sit in front of the same kind of games. Yeah, he was just that kind of guy. But then one day he goes and kills us all. He couldn't even be original about the way he did it. I'm not complaining. I was dying of boredom anyway. But guess what? I will be coming back, and I'm bringing my new toys with me.
The man refers to the husband who committed the murders as Dad. Therefore, it's a possibility that the man who set up this surreal corridor loop is the grown version of the 10-year-old son, or the grown fetus in the wife's womb who might have survived. This might be a bit of a stretch, as there aren't many solid elements hinting towards this theory, but Silent Hill franchise never shied away from creating surreal experiences mixed in with real tragic ones. In one of the radio announcements, The man behind the interferences suggests that the father hung himself with garden hose he found in the garage. But based on factual reports on the radio reporting, the father was found in the car listening to radio. If the father hanging himself is not referring to the first father of the family, then it's likely the guy behind the radio wished the father would do such thing, depicting that whoever is behind the radio has a personal grudge against the murderous father, guilt-tripping him about letting his pregnant wife work in a store with another man salivating over her, being fully aware of that, while he drowns himself in booze and spends all day watching TV. The paperback mentioning that he saw himself walking in front of him is reminiscent of the final cutscene, of the man stopping temporarily and watching his back, as if he's experiencing the same thing. But what is the reason behind it all? Who is the protagonist? And why is he tested so stringently and rigorously? And what is he chosen for? That's something we will discuss in another video. PT was specifically designed as such to have secrets for the players to decipher. The final game would presumably answer all the questions, but after several years, we are still left to speculate and interpret the game differently. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Also, you can recommend me convoluted games like this one by heading over to my Twitter page. It's been your host Dar. Till the next video, have a fantastic day.